thank you all for coming. I know you're not interested in the movie. You're just coming to hear me speak about psilocybin and so forth. And I guarantee you, just as Vice President Gore testified, he never inhaled, and none of us ever participated, even in our college years in Boston. So this is a great movie. I've seen it, and you're in for a treat. I'd like to thank Beth Gilligan for inviting me to talk a little bit about some of the science. It's an exciting opportunity. The major mission of the National Institutes of Health has to do, and the National Science Foundation, has to do with science outreach, because our tax dollars, your tax dollars, all of that goes to support the scientific research that's so important to the advancement of public health. So my goal, what I've been asked to do, was to discuss some of the underpinnings that go into the scientific aspects of, as was just mentioned, almost clarified in the movie, without giving away any giving away any aspect of the story. So I will try to do that. So here, in this first slide, this is the young, you'll see is the young Karamakate. And I entitled this, In Search of Spirit. You can't hear me? Oh, okay, sorry. Is it, pick up the mic? All right. I normally walk around when I lecture, I normally walk around with a little thing on me, so I like to be a little kinetic, so I won't be able to be tonight. I will unwind this. And there are definitely some serpentine wires here. And okay, I think I can, if we can can we free this wire up a little bit? Get this one. Thanks. There we go. All right, now I can move. All right, thanks. All right, so this is the young, as you'll see soon, this is the young Karamakate. In real life, he's actually a farmer. And I understand from reading a little bit about this that he wanted to be the star of the movie in order to be in it, and somehow they convinced him to get off the farm to be the actor. And he's a wonderful character. But I entitled this The Search of Spirit from Shaman to Psychotropics because it really is about, this movie really, at least in my opinion, from what I identified with this movie, is really about what we're all in search of. We're all in search of what is inside of us, asking those fundamental questions. Why am I here? What am I about? What am I going to do? Can I understand myself? We're both blessed as Homo sapiens with the ability to be self-aware, and we're also at the same time cursed by it, in that we are aware that our time on this planet is limited. And during that time, we seek spirit. It comes in many forms. It comes as organized religion. It comes as individual identity. And I see that, in my mind, that's what this movie is about. Well, it starts in about 1912. And the movie starts with Theodore Koch, Gruenberg, who was a German ethnologist. So that's a person who's interested in different ethnicities. He was very interested in the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest. So he spent his professional life in the Amazon, and he was an explorer in this general area of Colombia and Brazil in the early 20th century, and he meets this shaman, Karamakate. And this is the actual photograph of him. Unfortunately, this laser pointer is fading out on me, but this is Koch Gruenberg right here during his adventure and his explorations, and this is how it's portrayed in the movie, quite nicely. And this was very rewarding to see how the director and the producers of the movie tried to adhere to the actual facts of his explorations. Here's the Theodore Koch Gruenberg with Karamakate. during one of their expeditions in 1912. And here's Karamikate, not quite as handsome as the first image, but definitely a shaman. And here's Koch Gruenberg, I believe shoeless, as we can see over there, sitting down. And I also note, having taken a little yoga, that he's able to sit in a very low chair and seem comfortable, as they typically do in the Amazon. And actually, I was impressed that the shaman was actually sitting on something, because when I go to yoga, they make us try to sit on the floor without a chair. And I can never do that. I always roll backwards. I don't know what it is. But so 30 years later, right around 1942, and of course the world is at war, Schultes, who's an ethnobotanist, so he's interested in plants that are associated with different ethnicities, and he also goes to the Amazon, and he's really being paid to seek a source of rubber, because the supply of rubber products to the Allies has been cut off by the war in the East, in Asia, or reduced due to access. And his scientific interests are in the area of psychotropics. So in the movie, this is the aging Karamikate. So he's now, and I won't mention what is going on in his life, but he's the aged shaman, and there's quite a bit of focus in the movie on the spiritual connection with the forest, which is what I was referring to earlier. And this is quite typical of the shaman. They're indigenous religious leaders. They believe they can communicate with and learn from plants and nature in general. And this is something that we all experience when we go into the rainforest or any natural environment. We experience that very special spiritual feeling, and that's what this movie has I think, illustrated brilliantly. So here's the real Evan Schultes in the rainforest, and he's a scientist. He was from Harvard. Boston is, as in many things, a leader in areas of discovery, I guess even in psychotropics. He's exploring, and then here's in the movie, here he is speaking to the aged Karamikate, and he becomes very ill. And the part that pharmacology comes in is how the shaman tries to treat him. So what might they have been using? And we don't really know for sure what he was using, but what might they have been using? We do know that he at some point had malaria. So these are some of the, there are hundreds of thousands of natural products in the Amazonian rainforests. But these are some of the ones that he might have used. For an analgesic, it could have been morphine. For a psychotropic, psilocybin, I'll be talking about that. That's psilocybin is produced by a fungus, a mushroom, otherwise known as magic mushrooms culturally. Psychostimulants, cocaine, very prevalently used in the Amazon from a leafy plant, and anti-malarial quinine, which can be extracted from tree bark. So now let's skip ahead a little bit into the modern world and the pharmacology. So in the human brain, the serotonin is a neurotransmitter. Chacruna, so here's the structure of serotonin. It's a neurotransmitter. And the blue indicates the carbon skeleton, which is joined together by bonds. And here's a little OH group, which is kind of 2/3 of water. H2O. There's it's called a hydroxyl group. Now, chacruna, which is referred to in this movie, but not necessarily by name, contains dimethyltryptamine, which is this molecule here, N,N-dimethyltryptamine. And you can see, you don't have to know chemistry to see in the blue area the similarity between the structure of the active ingredient in chacruna, and the neurotransmitter serotonin's backbone. So that's really marvelous. And of course, the shaman knew to use chacruna, but they didn't know that there was dimethyltryptamine in there. But it still worked, so it was good enough for them. magic mushrooms contain psilocybin, and you can see from the blue area that psilocybin has great similarity to serotonin. There is some other groups here, and there's this phosphate group here, which in the human body is removed. The phosphate group is removed, and we end up with psilocin, which is the active component of psilocybin. And that is important, and I'm going to refer to that in the next slides. So here's the plant. If we just look at it, if you or I just walk through the rainforest and we look at this plant, it's just a nice leafy plant. We might want to chew on it, and we might feel something. It's actually, as a result, it's actually called Psychotria viridis. And the viridis just means green in Latin. I just looked that up today because I was wondering what it was. I thought it was going to be something more exotic, but the Psychotria is obvious. So the shaman would know how to identify those plants. And then there's ayahuasca, which is referred to in the movie. And ayahuasca, this is where it gets, I think, really interesting, at least for me. It contains harmala alkaloids. Again, just a little leafy plant on a tree, except to the shaman who knows what to do with it. And it contains, among other things, these alkaloids, harmine and harmaline, which you may have heard of, and these are reversible monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So these these compounds, when we eat some of these compounds, or we take a drug for a therapeutic agent, the liver detoxifies them, and one of the main mechanisms for detoxification is the enzyme. It's a whole class of enzymes, but for the moment I'll just refer to it as one enzyme, monoamine oxidase. So if that enzyme is inhibited, or class of enzymes is inhibited, the agent will accumulate in the body and thus in the brain as well. Then it also contains, very interestingly, a weak inhibitor of serotonin reuptake, this other compound, tetrahydroharmine. Now, what else do we know about inhibiting serotonin reuptake? And I will get to this in the next slide, or the slide after this one. That is that there are SSRIs. Has everybody heard of SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors? They're a major product, in our society, worth billions of dollars each year for the inhibition of serotonin reuptake to treat depression and anxiety. Well, the shaman knew about this a long time ago, and unfortunately they never formed a startup company. They should have come to Boston, because we're the startup company capital of the world, I think. Or if we're not, we should be. Well, we think we are, So, but anyway, what they did, the indigenous shaman at work would take this, they would create what's called a decoction. And this is going to be described, you're going to see this in the movie. And so the key is that the extraction process is very important in terms of forming the active agent. And you'll see at one point, the aged shaman is trying to remember how to create the therapeutic mixture. And that's a very interesting scene, which I won't talk about. But when you see that, think of this. He has to remember how to take chacruna, which has the hallucinogen DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and extract it and combine it in this decoction with ayahuasca, which has the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and to get the full effect, to get this vision, this window on spirit. 30 years later, now, Good Friday, 1962, back to Boston, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, Timothy Leary, Harvard Divinity School, and Boston University. There was the BU Marsh Chapel experiment of 1962. I was not there. Walter N. Pankey and Timothy Leary of the Harvard Divinity School designed an experiment and carried it out here in Boston, where they administered 30 milligrams of psilocybin and then niacin as a control experiment to student volunteers. There was a long line, longer than getting into this theater, to participate in this experiment. And nobody will admit to it today that they were there. But people reported after this that they had a really amazing, enlightening religious experience what they characterized as a religious experience. There is a sad story associated, just as an aside, that Walter Pahnke was doing his doctoral thesis. He eventually became an MD, and unfortunately died at 41 in a diving while doing snorkeling, I guess, or scuba diving off the coast of Maine. But he ended up with a productive life, and many of the people who participated in this had productive lives, and there was evidently no adverse outcomes. So back to the future. Today, another April day now, 2016. Don't worry about all these structures. I just briefly wanted to show you what the pathway is for the metabolism of psilocybin to psilocin. It's just an enzyme alkaline phosphatase. And the key thing here is that ayahuasca inhibits at this stage. So psilocin accumulates, and that's the psychoactive molecule. So in modern concept, we know this to be acting at a synapse, the serotonin synapse. This is the SSRI over here inhibiting the reuptake of serotonin, the natural neurotransmitter. And when that happens, there's an accumulation of serotonin in the synapse. And you can see here that these little widgets dock in the receptor, and so they act for a longer period of time, and thus there's more of an effect of serotonin in response to this drug. With regard to the movie and the shaman, they would use chacruna, which is an agonist at those same receptors. It's going to soup up the system. And ayahuasca to inhibit degradation. It's the same effect, accumulates serotonin. It's all working through the same mechanism. And now if someone is taking LSD, it's a synthetic compound, it would bind with high affinity to these receptors and really soup it up. Okay, so to summarize, we have melancholy. An individual might have melancholy, maybe, a little more than normal. There's a little bit of serotonin there. Takes an SSRI. He's happy, as are the investors in the company making the SSRI. And you notice the shape of a pill. I'm a pharmacologist, so everything is in the shape of a pill. Ideally a blue pill in that shape. Psilocybin mushroom, now he's really happy. There's even more serotonin, and he might get the seeds of the gods, ayahuasca, from a provider somewhere. I don't know where that would be. And if you take that, even on the SSRI, he's going to be extremely happy. So this just shows that our mental, our emotional state can be modulated very effectively, whether it's by traditional herbal medicines or by modern pharmaceuticals. And we bemoan the fact that these tribes, like I said, didn't patent these. They probably wouldn't have been able to, but that's a whole other story. Well, so here, what I'd like to do is, I was asked to talk a little bit about, just very briefly, about the future, where it's going. So that's easy, because it's easy to talk about that, because we're at the most exciting stage, I think, of neuroscience and neuropharmacology that's imaginable, at least for me. President Obama's Human Brain Project, or Human Brain Mapping Project, is dedicated to mapping the circuitry of the human brain, and people argue about whether that makes sense or not. But in any case, whatever we find out, knowing what the wiring diagrams are going to be and how that correlates with where these drug targets are and neurotransmitter targets is going to be very informative in terms of understanding how these perceptions are formed. We can know what the wiring diagrams are, we can know what the drug effects are, but what we don't know is how can we possibly be self-aware? How do these images form in our nervous systems so we know who we are and where we're going, and how do we feel? What do we think about things? All these emotional reactions that we have are pretty amazing, and to try to understand that. Can we understand it even based on computational methods? So that's where I think the really exciting new advances are going to be. I'm not sure if it'll be in my lifetime, but but that's where it'll be. Maybe in 100 years or maybe even 30 years, we'll be understanding this much better. So I'd like to leave you just with, when the modern world meets the old world, we find out more about where we are.
Ouch!
What do you think you're doing?
We've been walking a long ways and I was hungry and... Did you say something?
She was hungry.
She was hungry.
Well, how would you like to have someone come along and pick something off of you?
Oh, dear. I keep forgetting I'm not in Kansas.
Well, no, she's not in Kansas, and neither are we. And so the reason for that clip is that at least in my mind, depends on how we think about it. I wouldn't think about it necessarily as a person under the influence of a psychotropic, but as for the shaman, there is that connection there really is that connection with the tree, with the fruit of the tree, and there's a reality of that connection, and that's what I'd like to leave you with.